I actually want to start with recalling a journey on a tube train I took the other day. So as I was sitting on the tube, I saw this guy, and in my own mind, I'd already made up what I thought about him. He looked like someone that had just got out of prison. He had tattoos. He wasn't wearing a face mask. In fact, he was twirling the face mask around, and I was sitting there sweating because I thought, my goodness me, what's this guy doing? And so I'd made up my mind. He's not a good person. I can't trust him. He ignores the rules. All these things, just blatantly, judging this poor person. Now, we got halfway along my journey, and suddenly a member came over, like a woman carrying a child, and she needed a seat. Nobody got up, including myself. I want to put out that this guy immediately gets up and says, "Please take my seat." And she's saying, "No, I don't need." He says, "Please take the seat." So she takes the seat. He goes and moves down a seat, and I'm like, interesting, okay. And then another family gets on with a little boy who is scared about the tube train and the noise, and he starts calming the little kid down and says, "Take my seat." And he gets up again when nobody else had. And he had the most beaming smile, the most beautiful smile on his face, and compassion and concern. And I sat there feeling thoroughly chastised about my judgment, my kind of reading a book by its cover, as it were, rather than the heart of this person. In almost 5 seconds on the tube journey, I'd gone from not trusting somebody to suddenly thinking, wow, this guy has something about him. And how often does that happen in public life as well? Something shapes our decision in a spur of a moment, whether somebody has integrity or whether somebody has trust. So trust, can I count on somebody? Is there a political trust? What about confidence in the actual institutions around me? Do I trust the police anymore after hearing something bad? Do I trust the authority of Parliament when it doesn't necessarily do the thing I want it to do? And what about integrity? Is integrity just a checklist of what I do and do not? Is it a personal matter of acting accordingly to moral standards? Or is it something different? Is it about somebody who has a firm understanding of conviction and a resolve to stand by that conviction, even under difficulty and pressure? Now, in the UK, we've had lots of issues around this, particularly around standards in public life. Are people in public life really adhering to the obligation to not act inappropriately under influence or financial gain? Again, is it just a checklist, or do we want something more out of that? And does it really matter? Because when somebody is found to have done something wrong or taken financial gain, is it really playing out in an election result a couple of weeks down the line? And the question I always get asked about being in politics, and it's the one that tends to drive me mad, Camilla, is when people say, all politicians are the same. Everybody's the same. Everybody's dirty. Everybody's corrupt. And we had the expenses scandal many years ago, actually, in the UK, and that had a real dip in public confidence. But interestingly, it was some MPs that were seen as being lower in confidence on trust. Some, it was, oh, well, they had to do that. Whereas now we enter a time, is that still there? Do we really view people the same way? Are there answers or things that come across in a sense where we simply say, yes, but it's a pandemic, or, well, it's a war, so of course they had to act like that, or, well, it's a really difficult situation. Do we have grace for people? And again, going back to that tube journey, the way somebody looks, the way they dress. We often say that being a female in politics is particularly hard for people to maybe trust you or look at how you are in terms of competency. Trust and competency, maybe we confuse them slightly, and the same with integrity. Is it about what we do as well? And so that's kind of where I'm at, Camilla, in the sense that there are more questions than answers to this, I think.
And I would actually follow it up directly with another question, because you mentioned that people will often excuse the behavior of their leaders because there is a crisis. And my question is, when a crisis hits, are we perhaps more comfortable with authoritarianism than maybe we like to think? What I mean is, are we happy as long as we are safe? or do we still care about democratic rights and freedoms?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I think sometimes within that, we have to look also and be quite honest that trust can be manipulated and also purposely misleading or undermining processes. So normalized behavior in that situation as well, where somebody can literally say, you know, on the doorstep, you might hear, I expected it of them. And then they may say, well, I have to do this. And it goes further. So I work in refugee and migration policy. And where we're at times is this situation where somebody might say, you know, it's okay that I violate international law. What does that mean to me? Anything? Because, you know, I'm going to keep people safe. We have to be tough. We have to close our borders. You know, the International Convention on Rights and Refugees, it doesn't mean anything anymore because we need to have safe borders. It's for the greater good. But Max Weber actually said, he's a political thinker, he said, there is no more pernicious distortion of political energy than the worship of power for its own sake. And I think sometimes we can worship that power, whether it looks good or dresses good, or simply comes out with, okay, yeah, I bent the rules here and I bent the rules there, but it was for your good. You know, I'm being tough in this situation. There's a protest going on there. Okay, yes, you want to go there, but actually you can't. You can't do that because we need to protect you and we need to keep you safe. And those erosion of rights start to creep in. And I know others will talk a bit more on this. But I do think there is a tendency sometimes where we drift into letting somebody who sounds good, who dresses well perhaps, or who's quite charismatic or speaks the way I want them to hear, they say something I like. And then perhaps they get away with it, drip by drip by drip, because we don't think that they possibly could do us any harm, or perhaps we do, but we expect it of them again. And the question I would always ask in those circumstances is, what is it that actually someone has set out to achieve? What is it with their conviction? And if you'll allow me, Camilla, I just wanted to reference a poem. It's quite a funny poem, but it's about leadership. And it says, it's the true leadership treasure. So I'll just read the first two verses really. And it said, I went on search to be a leader, searching high and low above the meter. I spoke with authority that I remember. All would follow, all but one member. Why should I trust you? The one did ask. What have you done to achieve the task? And I think that is crucial. Is somebody achieving that task, or is it just a figment of our imagination? Are they talking a good talk? What is it that we want from our leaders? Do we want that tough kind of macho leader in a way? Do we want the tough borders? Do we want the kind of, this is the rules that you're going to follow? Or do we want someone that can both exhibit compassion and what we think is integrity in that situation, who might have to make strategic decisions as they go along?
In any democracy, there are always losers in the election. Are losers less likely to accept decisions and decision makers as being trustworthy?
I think it depends on how the decision was achieved. I think you can accept a decision, and rightly so, in a democracy when you know and trust that it is a fair and free election. And I think there's a difference between considering the decision maker who's been elected in as trustworthy off the back of an election. I think I'm going to get into trouble for saying this, but what I'd say is the job of the opposition is almost to make the other seem untrustworthy at times. And in fact, I would pretty much always say that my opposition is untrustworthy. That's why I'm in the opposition. So there is that. However, you can still find common ground with saying that, and you can absolutely say that the person opposite me who has won this election has integrity. You know, whether I believe in their policies is a very different matter, but their character, I can say absolutely, I trust them. And I trust the democratic process to get me there. When that democratic process is under question, I think that's a very different conversation, where it's very clear there has been some meddling or corruption, or even where you might be thinking in your own head, were the facts and the information given to people correct? Were people told a lie in order to get to this decision? What happened during this process? Even then, I'd still say, actually, you know, I've been, I hate to say, but I'm in the opposition party in the UK, so I'm quite used to losing. So I'd like to win some point, but I'm quite used to losing. It is hard to take, it is hard to accept. but you have to. And that is why there is still trust in a process, because that also builds trust. If I accept that process was free and fair, and then we move forward from that. But I do think it's a slightly different question where that process was under intense scrutiny and there are questions about it.